Hi everyone, and welcome back to the channel. So as you saw from my video last week, Max and I were on Vancouver Island for a week, and definitely one of the highlights of the trip for me was going on this whale watching tour. I had been looking forward to for weeks before the trip to go on this tour. So in today's video, I wanted to chat with you kind of about my entire experience photographing whales for the first time and maybe provide some tips based on that experience. I really hope somebody out there either finds this video helpful now or helpful in the future. But before we get into the video, I do want to mention that I will be mentioning a couple like products and the name of the company that we went with, but nothing in this video is sponsored. These are all just kind of my own thoughts based off of my experience. So without further ado, let's get into the video. So I thought we would start this video off talking about gear. So I would highly recommend that you use either a waterproof or a water resistant camera bag, gear, and clothes. So of course, while we were in Victoria, it did rain on us while we were on our whale watching tour, and I was using the Peak Design Everyday Sling bag. So it's got a really durable outer shell, and then it's got like the ultra zips, and so it kept all of my camera gear dry inside. And then one of the greatest things about Olympus is that they are so weather sealed. So a lot of the lenses and the bodies, they are splash proof, dust proof, freeze proof. So I honestly wasn't worried about my camera gear being out in the rain, just because I knew it could kind of weather the elements based off of previous experiences taking it out in the rain. But if your camera isn't weather sealed or you don't have like a water resistant waterproof backpack, then I would just consider having like a cover for your bag and your gear just to kind of protect it from the elements in case it rains on you. Along the same lines of this, just keep in mind the kind of boat you were on your whale watching tour. So when we were booking our trip, I knew we were going to be on a catamaran boat, so I wasn't too worried about ocean water getting on my camera gear because we were going to be like higher up on the water. But a lot of whale watching tours take you out on a Zodiac, so it really just depends on what you book. And Zodiacs are a lot closer to the water, and I just feel there's a lot higher chance of ocean water, salt water getting on your camera gear. So of course, I think depending on the boat you were on, it kind of just might change maybe the camera equipment you bring or the accessories you bring to make sure your camera gear is protected. This, of course, is completely based on personal preference, but I highly suggest that you pack light. When you're on a catamaran, sometimes you're sharing the boat with 50 to 200 people depending on the size of the catamaran. And then when you're on a Zodiac, it's even smaller of an area that you have to share with other people. And so if you have like a giant camera backpack with all the accessories and you bring a tripod just in case, it can become quite cumbersome because you also need to like maneuver a lot, I find, on the boat. And so kind of sharing the space and maneuvering on the boat, having a giant camera backpack just did not appeal to me whatsoever. So I highly suggest packing light. On this whale watching tour, all I brought with me and all I honestly used is I had the Peak Design bag, and then I used my 40-150 f2.8 Pro, the MC20 converter, and I did bring the 12 to 40 millimeter lens, but that is all the camera equipment I brought with me. It was really compact. I was able to like keep my bag on me but still maneuver on the boat and share the space with other people. So I just suggest packing light if you're going on a whale watching tour. Have lots of memory. So one of the things I was most paranoid going out on the boat was not having enough memory. So I made sure that I had lots of memory kind of before the trip and then before we actually went on the tour. So I think when we went on the tour, I had room for like 4,000 photos, which was more than enough because I think I took around 2,000 photos, but I actually had a backup memory card ready to go in case I ran out of memory that had room for like an additional 1,500 photos. So that's kind of one of the things that I definitely learned from our Vancouver trip when I didn't have enough memory and I was like deleting photos on the go, was to make sure I had enough memory for like the entire trip. And kind of on the lines of that is also have a backup battery. So I know when I've like gone out to photograph the eagles in the Thompson Okanagan that I go through batteries like crazy, especially if I'm using sequential high. So I only have 2 batteries total that I just have in my kit. And so one of them, I made sure that there was at 100% before our whale watching tour, and then I had a second battery ready to go in my camera bag that was also at 100% in case I went through too. Now our whale watching tour I think was around 4 hours long. I was photographing for a majority of the time, and I think I only went through one battery, but if it went any longer or if we did kind of a sunset one after it, I definitely would have required that second battery. So it kind of depends on how long you're going for. If you're going with your family, I would recommend that you bring them a set of binoculars. This is something that I wish that I had actually brought and for Max, because a lot of the times the whales are really far away and you can't really see them that well. Like, they're pretty small depending how far away they are. So if you're using a telephoto lens and you're taking photos, of course, you see them a lot closer than if you're whoever you're going with can, because they don't have anything. So I really wish that I had actually brought a set of binoculars for Max to use on our whale watching tour, because then he could have seen them a little bit closer than he did. Before we get into the positioning on the boat, I just want to touch on my experience using the MC20 converter on this whale watching trip. So I had taken out the converter like once before this trip to photograph some eagles in the Thompson Okanagan, and was only for like an hour, hour and a half. So I didn't get like a really good chance to use it, and I was a little worried about kind of my settings using the MC20. So with the converter, you go from 2.8 to 5.6, and so I knew I needed to keep my shutter speed high in order to kind of freeze the whales in motion and not have like a super blurry image. And so I did have to like up my ISO to like 500 or 600 during the trip, but it worked out completely great. Like, my autofocus was super sharp and everything. I didn't really have any problems with my settings as soon as I kind of dialed them in at the beginning. The camera system remained really light and small. Like, you don't even really notice that it's on your camera system to begin with. I probably could have gone away with using the 40 to 150, but it kind of just depends on the photo that you are looking for. If you are the type of person that wants to, you know, see the orca's eye, see every scratch in the orca's skin, if you want to see every barnacle on the humpback whale, then you might want to have a different kind of lens to bring with you that will get you those photos, because as much post-processing as you can do, and even with the 40 to 150 MC20 converter, you're still a distance away from the whales and you're not going to get that kind of shot. But I'm quite happy with having a lot of landscapes in my photo, so I was quite happy with using the MC20 with the 40 to 150, and I had no problem. Like, it's a great combo if you're just looking for something to take out with you on the whale photography trip that is going to continue being like a small setup for yourself. So I highly recommend that setup, the 40 to 150 and the MC20. Alright, so my second biggest concern, other than if the 40 to 150 with the MC20 converter was going to be enough reach to photograph whales, was where to stand on the boat. So I had done some reading beforehand, kind of on like, where do you stand on the boat? Like, what will give you the best kind of viewpoint of the whales? And on our catamaran, they did have like a front deck that you could stand on, and a lot of people go there to kind of watch the whales, and it's not a great spot for photography. I'm a short person, so I don't have any height on anyone, and so if I was to stand on the front deck, everyone would kind of like get in the photo. And even if I was at the very front, people would still get in the photo, because a lot of people lean over the side of the boat in order to take a photo themselves or see the whales, you know, closer. So being on the front deck is not a good spot, even on the sides. And I found the best spot to photograph the whales was on either standing on the stairs or at the top of the stairs. And so on our boat, we kind of had the two stairs, and then you had a little bit of seating on each side. And I found it was the best spot because you were out of the way of other people. Other people weren't in your way when you were photographing the whales, and you also had a little bit of extra stabilization up there, which is something you want to consider because you're on a boat that is moving. So you're trying to take a photo, right? but the boat is moving, you're going back and forth based on, what the boat is doing. And so you kind of need that extra stabilization, because I don't recommend you use a tripod on a whale watching tour, because you're on a boat with like 50, 100, 200 other people. And then if you're on a Zodiac, it's even more difficult. And so you don't really want to have a tripod out there that's gonna like maybe knock over, or somebody's gonna trip over the leg, or you're gonna be in the way of someone. So you kind of have to find a spot that will also offer you additional stabilization. So I found what was best was kind of leaning my back against a part of the boat, or leaning my legs on a seat or a part of the boat, so I had a little bit more stabilization there. So the stairs, and the top of the stairs kind of was the best of all worlds. So that's kind of where I stood for majority of the time, was either on the right stairs or the left stairs. And of course, depending on the boat, you might have to play around with it. I photographed from the back of the boat. I photographed from both sides of like kind of the top deck of the catamaran. I photographed on both sides of the stairs until I kind of found what worked for me. And so kind of spending that first little bit kind of figuring all of that out was good. But yeah, that's just kind of my take on where to stand when you're trying to photograph whales for the first time. All right, so I just want to provide a little bit of other tips when it comes to kind of going on a whale watching tour and maybe photographing the whales for the first time. The first being kind of figuring out, of course, before you even go on the whale watching tour, the best time to go. So when we Googled our local area and when was the best time to go whale watching, they said May to October, which was perfect because we were going in August. And then also what time of day, you want to consider that. So Prince of Wales, the company we went with, they had a kind of afternoon tour and then a sunset tour. And we ended up going with the afternoon tour because of two reasons. One, if we didn't see any whales, then they had this guarantee that you can go with them again for free. And so I wanted the afternoon one because if we didn't see any whales, then we had the second opportunity to go on the sunset tour. And then the second reason was I was a little bit concerned about the lighting. So with going at the end of August, sunset and when it gets dark here in BC has drastically changed since the beginning of the summer. It used to get dark between 9 and 10, but now it gets dark even earlier, and I was just really nervous that there wasn't going to be enough light, that I wasn't sure how the photos were going to turn out. So I just wanted to go on a little bit on the safe side, go in the mid-afternoon, and it ended up being perfect because it was kind of like a gray, cloudy day. The second thing is just do what you can to learn about the whales. So of course, before we went on our whale watching tour, I read actually a lot of blog articles, a lot of blog posts about whales, and then I also watched a couple documentaries about whales. I highly recommend that if your local area has a local exhibit about the whales, to check that out before your experience. Victoria's BC Museum actually had a orca exhibit on that we unfortunately didn't get to see before our whale watching trip, but we did actually see it after our trip, and it was really, really informative. So I highly suggest that you just kind of Google to see if there's any local exhibits featuring the whales in the area that you were visiting. And then lastly, spend a bit of time just researching the companies that you can go whale watching with. So I really wanted a whale watching tour company that really respected and cared about the whales, that went above and beyond whale watching procedures. So one of the companies that we looked into early on and that we ended up doing our whale watching tour with was Prince of Wales, and they were great. I really loved that company. I felt when I was doing kind of my Googling into them that they cared about the whales, that they went above and beyond the whale procedures. When we were on the boat with them, they explained to us that the catamaran we were on was actually a custom built catamaran. So it reduces a lot of kind of the effects that a boat might have on the ocean and on sea life. And so, for example, the catamaran style, there's less of the boat in the water. They use a jet propulsion engine, so no sea life can get caught in the propellers. So I really like that fact about the Prince of Wales. They also have 2 to 3 naturalists on board, so they're giving you facts and knowledge about the whales. And so in general, I really found that they cared about the whales and that they did a phenomenal job with our whale watching tour. So that was a lot of information. We kind of covered gear while going on a whale watching trip, positioning on the boat, as well as some other information kind of in there with whale watching. If you want any of this to kind of reference back to and use for later, there's going to be an article over on Beautifully Wander with all of this information, so you can save it for later. I really hope you liked this video. If you did, then hit that like button and maybe buy me a cup of coffee. Don't forget to subscribe because I post weekly to the channel every single Saturday about photography, and I'll see you in the next one.